And we are live.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series. My name is Taylor Hudak, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Andrew Smith, Christy Dock, and Steve Poikinen. So tonight we are going to be discussing a lot of news concerning Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. We have some videos to show you guys as well. But before we get to all of that, we do have two very special guests this evening. And our first guest of the night is Dak Rouleau. Dak is an independent journalist living in New Hampshire. He is the founder of overwritten.org, where he covers the decline of the American empire. He has interviewed Tulsi Gabbard one-on-one and asked 12 of the Democratic Party presidential candidates to declare their stance on Julian Assange. So Dak, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. How is everybody tonight?
Good. So hey, before we get into this, I skipped one very vital part, and these are the stats can sit for Julian Assange and for Chelsea Manning as far as their sentences are concerned. So today marks 244 days since the brutal arrest of Julian Assange outside of the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and day 3,291 of his unlawful and arbitrary detention. As for Chelsea Manning, today is day 273 in days in jail, and she is now up to $164,000 in fines. Every single day, she is being fined $1,000. So during this holiday season, if you guys are able to, do think about donating to these two very heroic individuals, Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. All right, so Dak, to now go back to you, I understand that you do have a video to show us because you did get the opportunity to question yet another Democratic presidential candidate. I know that I've written about him already because he actually wrote a letter about Julian Assange, which was quite interesting, and we'll get more into that. But this particular candidate that we're talking about is Michael Bennet. So of course, he's not the most popular candidate, but the reason why his stance on Julian Assange is so important is because of some of his history, and I'll let Dak take it up from there.
Sure. So Michael Bennet is one of two United States senators. I believe he's the junior senator from the state of Colorado. And Michael Bennet is a long shot candidate for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. But last year, he was one of 10 United States senators to write a letter to 10 Democratic Party senators, that is, who wrote a letter to Vice President Pence, imploring him to put pressure on the Ecuadorian government to expel Julian Assange from their embassy in Britain. One of the other 10 senators, by the way, was my own state senator, Jean Shaheen, and I will be asking her about this issue as soon as I am able. But I thought it would be good to ask Michael Bennet about his stance on Julian Assange, since he is directly responsible for Assange's persecution in a way that most of the other Democratic Party candidates are not. So on this past weekend, I decided to go ask Bennet for his stance on Assange, and I recorded it, and I have the video ready whenever we are good to go.
So this is just the video of Dak asking Michael Bennet, confronting him really about his signing of this letter, and then also just his stance on Julian Assange. The response to this is quite shocking, and we'll discuss that once he plays the video for us. And you can find his work again at overwritten.org. You wrote an entire article about this, in addition to many other articles about the various candidates and their stance on Assange.
All right, let's see. One moment. All right.
Freedom of the press. Now, there's no more disturbing illustration.
Right.
You mentioned Donald Trump's attack on freedom of the press. Now, there's no more disturbing illustration of this for me than the persecution of Julian Assange. You, last year, were one of 10 United States senators who wrote a letter to Vice President Pence imploring him to put pressure on the Ecuadorian government to expel Assange from the embassy in Britain. And now that we see how Assange is being tortured in Belmarsh and knowing how he's going to be tortured here, I'm wondering how, as president, you are going to make amends for this.
Well, I can actually think of a more egregious example by far, which was the assassination of Khashoggi by the Saudi Arabians. And President Trump, who is a journalist living in the United States of America, who was lured to his death in Turkey by the Saudis, and whom our intelligence agencies all said was killed by the Saudi prince, and then Donald Trump just turned his back on it, not standing up for his values. So I guess I disagree on which was more egregious, but I think the latter, and I appreciate your asking the question.
So Dak, looking at that again, here's another candidate who says, I appreciate the question, which I said to everybody when a politician says this, they're usually just pissed off that you asked it to begin with, I think. But here we have Michael Bennett comparing two cases of, journalists being tortured and treated brutally. We are not at all saying, before we get started in this conversation, I want to make note that none of us are saying that what happened to Jamal Khashoggi is okay by any means. It's horrific what had happened. I think what's really disturbing with this particular exchange is the fact that he makes a comparison. I think that was really unnecessary. So why don't you go ahead and tell me sort of your thoughts about this, what was going through your head and your perspective, and then we'll open it up to the panel.
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't mention Khashoggi, and I did not compare Assange's plight to Khashoggi's execution. That was something that Bennett just pulled out of his ear as a dodge, and not an unskillful dodge at that. That was pretty good under the circumstances, I thought, to try to deflect from Assange to a total non sequitur. But with this situation, what was going through my head, you folks have asked me before about what is the best way to frame questions to these various politicians regarding Assange. I really did want to ask him how it felt to have Assange's blood on his hands, knowing that this is a person who, unlike all of the other presidential candidates I've interviewed, this is a person who is directly responsible for Assange's suffering that's going on as we speak. Yet at the same time, we have to remember that when we confront these people, we cannot look like fanatical, unhinged individuals, because that just makes Assange look bad in turn. So I tried to be measured by asking him just about his direct role and how he's going to make amends for this. Nevertheless, he showed a complete unwillingness to take any kind of responsibility, and he showed a complete incapacity for remorse. And it's the same nauseating deflection that I've encountered from almost all of the other presidential candidates.
Well, we lost
So
Taylor.
I love how well he kind of just completely deflects and goes 100% off topic. Like, it's not about him. It's not about the torture of Julian Assange. It's not about him and these 9 other senators that signed the paper essentially asking for Julian to be trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison for the International Monetary Loan Fund. And then he's like, well, these people that we kind of just give billions of dollars in weapons to just happen to bone saw some other guy that worked for the Washington Post. So let's talk about that instead. So,
Well, and that letter also asks for the asylum to be reconsidered on the basis that the 2016 election was interfered with by the Russians, by WikiLeaks for releasing this information. So really that letter was framed for what these indictments against Julian Assange are not. So that's another interesting piece too, is that you've got the Russiagate element intertwined into this letter asking for the vice president to ask another country to reconsider their asylum that they granted, as if that is an appropriate thing to do.
I'm going to go ahead and pull the letter up while we're talking about it,
Yeah,
because it is
so
important. And I there's also something that we need to think about when we're discussing Michael Bennett, and that is he sits on the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. So when this letter was being written, Michael Bennett more than likely had knowledge that the Spanish security firm UC Global was providing a direct feed of
Very true.
everything that Julian Assange was going through while this letter is being drafted.
that's a great point.
And he might have even been aware of the secret indictments and what they were pertaining to
So
at that time.
I want to read portions of this letter.
Mhm.
All right, so it starts out here. I don't want to read the entire thing, but it starts out, Dear Mr. Vice President, Mike Pence, of course. We write in advance of your visit to Ecuador to encourage you to continue building upon the important progress made in our bilateral relationship over the last year. Now, before I keep going, let's remember who is the current Ecuadorian president at this time and still is, Lenin Moreno, who's been absolutely pretty much a puppet of the US government. So he's been very willing to cooperate with the United States. So I think they also see a unique opportunity here to kind of get this president to really fold. So I'll continue. We believe your trip can help forge a new chapter in longstanding relations between the U.S. and Ecuador built on shared values and address remaining challenges between our countries. Let's remember, we're talking about a human being here. Over the last decade, the relationship between the US and Ecuador was marked by unfortunate tensions. However, under President Lenin Moreno's leadership, there is a unique opportunity to reverse this trend. In the last 2 months alone, President Moreno's administration has signed 2 important agreements with the US to improve cooperation to combat transnational criminal organizations and illicit trafficking. So here we go. They mentioned Lenin Moreno. So Steve did walk out for a second, but I don't want to go through all of this. But basically, I thought was really interesting at the end of this article too, is that they actually have the nerve to address other journalists. I believe El Camerico journalists.
Yeah.
I'll read that section. If you could go up there. In closing, so here it is. In closing, we ask that you convey our condolences to President Moreno for the deaths of the 2 journalists from the El Camerico newspaper and their driver who were abducted in northern Ecuador by a dissident faction of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia in March of 2018. Now, remember, March of 2018 is significant because that is when Julian Assange's internet access was cut off, and then it is also when those secret charges related to his
the indictments were starting to be processed and go through the chain of command of how you, I guess, release those. I think they were filed, maybe would be the correct term around that time.
Filed, yes. If that has any relation, I don't know, but I just
it's interesting.
Interesting note. We stand behind the efforts of the U.S. Embassy in Quito to provide all relevant assistance efforts to investigate this incident and address regional security challenges. So here we have again too this sort of way or manner to make it appear as if these people really care about a free press. But of course, they're picking and choosing which journalists they want to support. That is not at all to say what happened to these 2 journalists and their driver is horrible. However, it has to apply to everybody. And then as you see at the bottom, there are 10 Democratic senators who signed this, and one of them is Michael Bennett, which was the individual that Dak questioned in the video.
Yes, and there's Jean Shaheen, the one of the 2 New Hampshire senators. And don't worry, Shaheen, I'll be visiting you as soon as possible. But I think that at this time, as we focus on, or as Bennett rather wants to force us to focus on the murder of Khashoggi, we should remember something Gore Vidal said in his own speech about the national security state in 1998. He was speaking about the abuses of the Stalin administration, and he said that Stalin's abuses of the Russian people are a Russian problem, not an American problem. The murder of Khashoggi is a Saudi problem, not an American problem, whereas the persecution of Assange is a problem of our own government, and therefore that is something that has been my focus. So Bennett's little non sequitur does not work beyond the immediate context of the video. But nevertheless, he does show, as I said, a complete unwillingness to accept his own responsibility in this, which was especially disgusting. It was really repulsive for me to be in the presence of somebody who had been directly responsible for Assange's plight. It was infuriating in a very unique way. It was challenging to remain calm in his presence. I did not want to shake his hand when he came by me, and so I did not. But yeah, I don't know that I've ever been in the presence of such a repulsive person in my entire life.
Jamal Khashoggi's brother was a Saudi arms dealer for decades. Sold a boat to Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father. That boat was eventually bought by Donald Trump, but Jamal Khashoggi's brother and Prince Andrew were the two principal arms dealers for the UK and Saudi Arabia for a number of years. So when Michael Bennett speaks about protecting or wanting to find out what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, it is in the interest of the national security state for him to focus on that guy. Not because he wants to solve a murder or root out the problems with that, but he wants to of course defend a pro-Western journalist, a pro-empire journalist, a pro-regime change journalist. And not only that, there are so many ties to both Jeffrey Epstein and our global arms trading, just based around that family. He's, Colorado senator. They're all fairly right-leaning anyway. Even the quote unquote Democrats. But Bennett in particular is more intertwined with the national security state than a lot of the senators that have come out of there over the last couple of decades.
I just wanted to say something quickly. You mentioned Jeffrey Epstein. Bennett did spend a fair bit of time talking about America's relationship to Israel. He was speaking. I took a video. It was only part of his statement on Israel, unfortunately, so it doesn't really work. Play it out of context. But he was explaining that Donald Trump has hurt America's relationship with Israel. Even though at the same time he acknowledges that Netanyahu, a notorious Nazi and war criminal, says that Trump is, quote, the best friend that Israel has ever had. He expresses his incredulity that Netanyahu would make such a statement, yet at the same time he says that Trump has weakened our relationship with that country. So Bennett is all over the map when it comes to these international militaristic intelligence agency aggressions. There's actually an article that I quoted on my own website where Bennett's extensive tour of apology for the Israeli government's abuses are detailed in full.
So we have a question for you, Dak, and you're getting a lot of love from our viewers. And also thank you to Jack Scythe for that message. I know you're one of our newer viewers, so we really appreciate that and that you enjoy our show. But Propaganda, our friend Quinn, hi Quinn, he wants to know, Dak, do you feel Bennett's base at the event was Clinton fans? And what were the audience's reaction to your being there?
Well, first of all, hello, Quinn. Yeah, undoubtedly, these were hardcore establishment Democrats who will vote for whichever war criminal is placed in front of them. This was a house party, actually. The reason I went was because I knew that the audience would be so small that I would be able to get my question in. The homeowners had all over the walls of their house photos of themselves with Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Cory Booker, several times they've photographed themselves with Cory Booker. John Lynch, who, for those who don't know, is the former governor of New Hampshire and a close friend of Robert Kraft, a close friend of Donald Trump, a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. The list goes on and on. So yes, these were establishment Democrats, Clinton fans, Obama fans, Biden fans, Warren fans, however you want to describe them. Yeah, these are not people who have any concern for the progressive redirection of the Democratic Party. These are people who will vote for whichever Democrat is put in front of them.
Okay, so
one of the other questions, Sophia asked, who is Dak planning on asking after Bennett? Do you have anybody else in mind?
Oh God! Hello, Sophia. The problem is that it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to find candidates who actually open themselves up to a significant number of questions. I think I talked about that the first time I came on this show, that Elizabeth Warren, for example, takes extreme measures to ensure that she limits the number of questions that the audience asks. I was shocked to see that video of Joe Biden being confronted by that portly gentleman about his son's connections to Ukraine. I couldn't believe Joe Biden actually allowed that kind of questioner to pass through screening. So I'm not sure if there's going to be another chapter to the story after this. I deliberately do not say when I'm going to go see people for security reasons, I suppose, but I do see some people lined up in New Hampshire soon, and just sort of have to play it by ear, I guess. But the only one who's missing so far among the major candidates would be Elizabeth Warren, because I've given up on Joe Biden. That's not going to happen. Sorry.
I think Joe Biden's given up on Joe Biden at this point.
Joe Biden knows he's still running, actually.
Yeah, I can't believe he's still running either. So someone in the chat, Emberg33, hi, he said, should ActionForAssange host an Assange town hall or debate with all candidates who agree from the Greens to the Democrats?
We would love to.
We'd have Dario Hunter, we'd have Adam Kokesh, and we would get a non-answer from Cullen forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And I don't know. Actually, now that Tulsi's dropped the debate, maybe she might be into something like that.
True. Maybe we can finally get her on.
But yeah, it'd be fun to listen to Dario Hunter and Adam Kokesh go back and forth for a while. We basically had that forum here on this vigil before.
That's true.
So I actually got, well, Jason Burmis, for everyone who doesn't know, he has his own channel over on YouTube too. He said that he'd be interested in doing that with us. If we did get a bunch of candidates involved to actually question them and have our own like forum and debates.
They won't even answer my quick question. They're not going to be sitting down for an extended interrogation session by people who actually understand Assange's case and understand what's at stake. They avoid this question as passionately and as feverishly as they can. As we saw with Michael Bennett, as we saw with Pete Buttigieg, they're not going to be participating in anything like that. Sorry.
So
I wouldn't expect them to.
People in the chat are asking how they can support you. If you take any sort of donations for your work.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my PayPal link is at overwritten.org. It will pay for the mileage for me to go to these candidates and go listen to their swill on the off chance that I actually get to ask them a question afterwards. For Michael Bennett, I'm not too bitter about it since it was only 10 minutes down the street from my house. But the 140 miles I wasted traveling around the state trying to ask Cory Booker, that still irks me a little bit. So yeah, if they want to go on overwritten.org, I would definitely appreciate any assistance that they have. Otherwise, you can definitely donate to Julian Assange's defense fund if you feel that that's a better use of your energy and resources. You can defend WikiLeaks, give them a donation. I think that would probably be a better way of supporting what we do here than giving money to me. But whatever you feel is right for you.
So Propaganda asked another question. Quinn asked, Jack, do you ever feel threatened by guests or security at these events?
Yeah. Yes, I do, 100%, which is part of the reason I'm not going to be going to see Joe Biden anymore, is I do not feel comfortable walking among all that Secret Service that he has. He does have Secret Service. You can see them in the background. I think I posted a picture of that on my essay about the day I went and tried to ask him about Julian Assange. But if you refer to the video that I took of me with Pete Buttigieg, you'll hear about 400 people in the audience behind me applauding when Pete Buttigieg refuses to offer any support for Assange. So yeah, you're going in there knowing that nobody in the audience has any sympathy for what you say. You know that they are going to despise you and mock you as soon as you ask the question, and you have to allow yourself, if you're going to ask these presidential candidates about Assange, you have to be willing to allow yourself to be publicly humiliated like that. It's okay for me because I don't really have any self-esteem as it is, but for people who do have some kind of emotional tether there, it might be a little bit traumatizing. So yeah, I do feel I don't really feel like I'm among friends, as it were. Yeah, it's not a pleasant experience.
So guys, do let us know in the chat if you have questions for Dak. Keep them coming. We always check our chats, of course. So are we at the end? Jack Scythe wants to know, are we at the end of Animal Farm or the start of Idiocracy? You know what? I just actually watched Animal Farm not too long ago. I didn't really understand it, but for some reason that book has been coming up quite a bit.
It has a lot. It just keeps getting referenced a lot recently. I agree.
Yeah, are we at the end of Animal Farm? Yeah, I think we've gone beyond that. We're probably on the third or fourth sequel to Animal Farm at this point, because if you want to see some swine being led to the slaughter, this is what I would recommend you do. You should go to one of these presidential rallies for someone like Michael Bennett or someone like Pete Buttigieg, and just go up to the bourgeoisie in the audience and ask them, what do you like about Pete Buttigieg? What's the appeal with this guy? And they'll say, I like his stance on abortion. And you just have to stand there and say, yeah, good stuff, huh? You see that these people are so brain dead, it's not even funny.
So another question, in the current surveillance capitalism climate and extension of the NDAA, are we likely witnessing the end of people like Assange and WikiLeaks? What are your thoughts? It's for you, Dick.
Oh, it's for me? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, we're not here just to pass the time. We're here because this is our way of sort of planting our flag in the stand and saying, you and whose army. Yeah, there's a reason that Julian Assange is rotting in prison. It's because that this is the final chapter, as it were. And if we don't rally our troops in the fourth quarter, we're going to find that there won't be an overtime. Yeah, the government isn't going to be especially concerned about like the fish rot leak that is going to be totally incomprehensible to the average American. But the government definitely doesn't want us understanding how our major political parties undermine their own stated intentions to lock us into a state of fascistic repetition. So yeah, it's looking pretty dire.
And as something interesting too that I'm trying to plant the seeds for and get started myself, doing live vigil watch parties in person, getting friends together, advertising it on like your Facebook page to locals that just to try to give people like an epicenter for like sparking local activism and local imperialist movements and stuff like that. So that's something that I'm just trying to find a church basically, because most of them will do it for free if they'll let you do it at all.
See, here's the evidence that Andrew is a closeted Christian, guys. He wants to hold the vigils on Sundays now too. He's bringing this church talk.
My show's on during when most people go to church, or at least here. My show's on 10
religion here.
We will take whatever support we can get for Assange. If that comes from the church, so be it.
We can get the church on board. Let's do it.
If we have to smuggle Assange into the church and scream sanctuary like Quasimodo smuggling Esmeralda away from the executioner, so it shall be.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I totally cut you off, and I'm really sorry for getting super close to the camera just there, but like way too close. Andrew, why don't you finish up your thought? I'm sorry. I had to though. It was just
no,
perfect.
that's all. So if anyone out there would be interested in trying to do something like that, whether it's at your house or at some local community center or something, give it a shot. There's a couple places that I've reached out to see if I can get them to host literally me there with a TV every week. Just trying to inspire other people locally to care about things. So I think other people can do it. It's super easy.
Can I introduce a topic about Mr. Bennett specifically?
Yeah.
Because I mentioned earlier the revulsion that I felt standing in the presence of this psychopath and this torturer. The way that it was my bile was overwhelming me in a way. He made sure to give out these cheesy little cards for his campaign at the event, and there's this photograph of him standing and smiling with his wife and daughters. And the whole time I was looking at this, the only thing I could think of was the fact that Assange is being cut off from his own family, possibly forevermore, while this pig stands posing with his delightful family. There is a kind of a sadistic satire to that publicity stunt that he takes, pimping out his family while Assange is being cut off from his own. And it's this kind of wretched cruelty of dishonesty that is turning me off from politics completely. Once Tulsi Gabbard's campaign comes to an unsuccessful end, I don't imagine I'm going to be supporting any politician ever again for the rest of my life. I mean, never say never, but.
Okay, Dak, before we do wrap up your segment here, why don't you give some final thoughts, some final statements, end off with anything you'd like to let the viewers know about, and then also do make sure that you let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work. And thank you again so much for coming on. Always love to have you here. You do great work. And also Dak too, guys, he has allowed us to publish some of his work on ActionForAssange.com. We just republished actually one of his articles from a few months ago, and then Dak and Christy contributed to an article as well. That's posted on ActionForAssange.com, so do check that out. And again, Dak, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Christy did a great job with some sort of quick snap research on that article, which was very helpful when I was scrambled with 3 different things at once. Yeah, the only message I want to say to here is that this is like my closing statement, is that with Michael Bennett, as I said, the reason I went to his rally was because it was a small, low-key rally where only about 20, at the most 20 people attended. Therefore, I thought he might be a little bit more candid than someone like Joe Biden, who knows he's going to face intense media presence. Nevertheless, he was just as phony and just as insincere as the top-tier candidates. And so my goal in all of this has been to expose the Democratic Party for the fascistic right-wing authoritarians that they are. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way, that especially progressives and Democrats, they don't want to see how corrupt their candidates are. But there's really nothing for us to do except keep pushing the evidence in front of them over and over again.
All right, Dak Rouleau, thank you so much. You do great work, and we know that our fans are big fans of yours as well. So guys, do make sure that you check out his work on overwritten.org. And Steve is pulling up for you all right now. Oh, I love this. Oh my gosh, you know what?
So for the people that were shouting out